Eskom has confirmed that it has placed its head of security advocate Karen Pillay under precautionary suspension. The power utility says this is to allow space for an investigation into allegations leveled against her. Eskom won't go into details about the nature of the probe and says it will on comments on the matter, or rather it will only comment on the matter once the investigations are finalized. Meanwhile, Parliament has welcomed the move. All right, for more on that development out of Eskom, we are now joined by the African Security Congress President Tebogo Motloung and the energy analyst Ruse Moleshe to help us in this conversation. Tebogo, good evening. Good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. And Ruse, I'm going to come to you in a moment. But Tebogo, let me come first to you. About 3 days ago, when you were raising this matter of the 500 million rands contract, you said you wanted the acting head of security to be harshly suspended and possibly also looking at later on bringing about a criminal case against her. Eskom is not confirming for us at this particular point in time if indeed the reason for the precautionary suspension is the fact that they are investigating this 500 million rands contract. However, we do know, and we have heard from their appearance at Scopa earlier in the week, at least from the head or chief procurement officer, that they are looking into this contract to get to the bottom of exactly what happened there. Maybe, Tebogo, I'll come back to you in just a moment. Let me bring Ruse into this. Ruse, the Eskom is not giving us a reason for the suspension, but Eskom is saying we are misquoting their reasoning. I mean, what could possibly be the reason for the suspension at this particular point?
Good evening, Thabo. I wouldn't necessarily be able to go into the specific details of what would that reason be. Safe to say that obviously, as we are all aware, Eskom has been doing a lot of work of reviewing all of the corruption related to procurement, whether it's companies, corporates that have agreed to pay back Eskom, current employees that are within their midst that they've been reporting to SCOPA regarding their efforts to try and root out the sabotage, the corruption. As you would know, that has an impact on Eskom's financials, which has an impact on its efficiency and its ability to really do maintenance on its plant, to continue with rolling out of infrastructure. So the individual specific contract, I don't think I have enough details to comment.
But if the concerns are around the head of security itself, I mean, what are the chances of Eskom getting this right? I mean, they've now and again complained of people who are deliberately trying to sabotage the stability of the power supply. And now we're hearing that there are concerns around the head of security.
If that was true, that would be a concern, obviously, for Eskom, and they would be going in the right direction if they start investigating so that they can ascertain whether or not what they are thinking is the case. They can confirm whether that is the case or not. So they will investigate, they will suspend so that obviously there is enough time for them, or there's no interference with the investigation, which investigation could come back exonerating or confirming what they are suspecting. So we don't know.
All right, let's bring back Tebogo then to the conversation. Tebogo, I hope your line is better now. Your reaction to Eskom's action on the suspension, precautionary be it, of the acting head of security?
How are you, Mzuli?
Yeah, I'm well. Hope you're well too.
Yeah, I'm actually, my head, it's nearly over the moon, but not yet there. Look, man, our reaction is that the Eskom's decision to suspend their head of security says it very clearly that what we were raising with Eskom, we were correct. Actually, the suspicion that there's too much corruption that is happening in the security sector there in Eskom, it's actually an honest truth. Why would they go and suspend her after we have made a march and not actually wait and probe into this or be stubborn about it. But they immediately went to suspend her, which tells you that this thing is there, it's happening. There is corruption that is there. And it's not over because we did not only ask for the suspension of Pillay. Also, Beholza must be suspended because
all right, we seem to have lost Tebogo there on the line, and we'll try and get back to him and get him back on the line in just a moment there. Tebogo is, of course, with the African Security Congress. He's the president there. He has previously raised this issue of the head of security to be suspended. Ruse, let me come back to you and say, I mean, in the context of the president going to Paris and saying we need $96 billion and you're hearing that at some point Eskom just decides on a whim to say, no, we just want to get extra security for 3 months, and they just willy-nilly sign a purchase order without following the necessary procurement processes to ensure that there's competitive bidding and they're getting the best price. I mean, is that consistent in a way with an Eskom that says we still need more money when you are not properly actually distributing the money that you currently have?
I missed you a little bit in terms of your question earlier.
I'm saying in the context of a president going to Paris and saying we need $96 billion and we are sitting now with a controversy around a 500 million rand contract. It seems to me some disconnect between an Eskom that says we need more money and an Eskom that is less prudent with how it spends its money.
So the president is referring to the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan, which had initially they'd said that they are looking for $85 billion. I think it's just a generic indication of how much would be required to finance that plan. Obviously, the details, even for the $85 billion, have not been ironed out. And yes, you are correct. Eskom needs to be seen to be improving in terms of ethics, governance, as well as corruption, for them to be able to go back and say, this is what we are looking at. But I think with the reporting that is happening and actually trying to suspend or investigate even more, that's a good indication because it shows that at least we are moving towards the right direction. You would recall that some of the big companies have been taken to task and they've paid back Eskom, and some are putting in contingencies in terms of the court cases that they're going to, in case they are able to. So the more Eskom recovers, actually, the financials, the better they can be to enable to go to someone else and ask for money. So it is a good thing that they must find people who are corrupt. They must recover that money so that they can use it the way it was supposed to be used in the first place.
Now, of course, as you put it, it's this 85 billion. Is it a thumb suck? I mean, what is it? What informs that 85 or 96 billion considering that there is already a portion that has been committed? At this point, we are also still unclear and unsure how that is currently being used in the just transition process.
Yeah, so the investment plan looks at a number of interventions. Whether realistic or not, that's another question for another day. But they look at a number of interventions, including renewable energy projects. They include hydrogen projects. They include electrical vehicles, as well as mitigation, meaning making our adaptation, making infrastructure resilient to climate change. So there are a number of interventions, and they do mention in the investment plan that the money that they are looking at is quite huge. It is a plan that is supposed to go over a number of years. Some of those plans are not really realistic for the short term, but that is what they have looked at, and that's what the investment plan looks at.
Yeah. So are you saying at this particular point the president is possibly making just a broad appeal when it comes to the nuts and bolts of it? I suppose it will come down to some of the officials who are there, and depending on who raises an interest to say we would certainly like to make the investment.
Yes, this is quite a broad appeal. Even that 85 billion is also very broad, because what the funders had mentioned is that they will look at specific projects. So within the broad framework of renewable energy, specific projects they will fund, they will have to look at, review the risk, review everything in terms of the general way of looking at projects and financing. So it's not going to be just a bag of money that will be thrown in there. It will be very specific, go to very specific projects, including technical assistance to get the projects to a level where they are feasible for funding.
And what's the exchange? I mean, one would say we get into these arrangements, we ask for money, and they bring the money here and they say, here's 85 billion, shut down your mines. And then you've got contestation within the ANC itself, where one minister says the mines are not going anywhere. As far as he's concerned, we've got the coal and we can certainly use that as base load. So what are the conditions that come with this money as we are making an appeal? And are we considering what the implications would be in our current energy crisis?
The risks that I see from having looked at that document is obviously, as you correctly point out, the huge role that coal plays in the South African economy, and Eskom in particular has over 80% of their supply coming from coal. So if you just do not have a proper plan for how you're going to replace that infrastructure, and because they are looking for green projects, they won't be funding things like coal, gas, and all of that. It is a risk to our security of supply, because we cannot replace coal with renewable energy only. We can supplement renewable energy, but we cannot run on renewable energy only. We need flexible supply. We need baseload supply. It is also a risk to the economies in Mpumalanga, obviously, because of the jobs that they are looking at. The actual investment plan doesn't have an actual plan on how they will be dealing with the socio-economic issues there, except to say for Eskom employees will lose their job. But it's not a broad economic plan that is very detailed in terms of this is how we're going to fund it, this is how we're going to do it. With the committee, which they've decommissioned already, the project looks at the Eskom employees that have lost their jobs to replace them. But we know that the value chain it will be the value chain that will be impacted. That goes far beyond specific individuals working within Eskom. It will go into some company that's in Sandton, that supports a coal mining business, that a legal company, a financial company, will go into the tertiary sector, will go into the mining. So we must be looking at the whole value chain to be able to say we comfortably can say we have. So that is the second risk, in my view.
Now, Ruse, if you, for example, look at the Grootvlei letter of intent that was signed, I haven't really seen the full detail of it. I just saw the press release. But it speaks, for example, about a smart agricultural kind of intervention. Are they turning that power station into a big farm? And what does it mean? Are they going to be taking those who would have been employed there and turn them into farmers? And are they, I suppose, interested in being farmers?
I mean, right now, what they are saying is that whatever lessons they learn from Komati will be the lessons that they implement on new projects, which means there's a plan, but not a real plan. And agriculture is one of the so-called interventions that will help the communities that will be affected by the fact that you have coal-fired power plants around there, and there's a trickle down assumed to those communities who have employment or small businesses. So that is what that particular project is targeted at. Whether or not that's the right intervention, I am not certain, because I have not seen a proper plan that says this is how the full value chain, as I say, and the full loss of economic activity will be dealt with. For instance, the U.S. has got a similar thing where they have a coal-fired powered region, and in the U.S. there's a budget that President Biden has put in place, and there's got specific minerals that will replace the coal-fired power fleet. So they've got a whole plan and a whole budget related to how they're going to do the whole thing, not just focusing on specific employees. For instance, mining employees earn a lot more than your employees in the renewable energy sector. So if they lose those jobs, where are they going to go? So I am not convinced that there's a credible plan. There is a plan, but I don't think it's credible.
Ruse Moleshe, much appreciated. Thanks for coming on, energy analyst. Tebogo, I think we've got you back as we wrap up the conversation. On the 11th of June 2023, Eskom issued a letter to say, South Africans, everything was done according to book as far as this 500 million contract is concerned. And 500 million is what was budgeted for. But they are saying only 250 million has actually been invoiced. What's your reaction?
Including, it's amazing that they'll boast that they've only used 250 million. It's still money that they've used unlawfully. And we don't care whether they've used 50 rand or 100 rand or 1 million. The matter of the fact is that there was a decision or there was a budget placed there that this budget will beef up security, which is 500 million. So we'll speak about the budget, not the capacity of the money that they've used. This was wrong and they need to account for it. And actually, at the highest letter, this is wrong. We want accountability and we are going to make sure that they account for this money. Their decision to suspend the current Pillay shows very clearly that these people did not follow all the policies that they were supposed to follow in terms of appointing this contract. So what we are going to do, or what we are going to make sure that happens is that they still suspend also Holzer because he's still there. We did not ask them to suspend Pillay alone, but also Holzer, he was involved in this thing. He must be suspended, the operations manager. Secondly, we are going to make sure, as we promised in our march, that a criminal case is going to be opened against them. And we are going to pursue it until they get arrested. We want to see them in jail with the kids thrown away deep in the ocean so that criminals like them do not come up again because, had it not been them, that 500 million rand would have used into solving the load shedding issue. Right now, I'm struggling to speak with you, comrade, because of the load shedding. So they need to take this case very seriously. If not so, they've got another thing coming to them.
Tebogo Motloung, I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on. African Security Congress President reacting to the precautionary suspension, shall I say, of the acting head of security at Eskom, Advocate Pillay. Right.